OverSoul Overland. This is the story of a man who has found a new hobby. Amid the torrent of options in life, sometimes being dedicated to one thing, that is a trial in and of itself. To build beauty in a place where there is none. To seek in the places that are lost to the mind. To find home in a place you're just passing through. For this wanderer, sauntering on into the sunset, digging deeper within myself to find the things that are needed and essential, to realize personal truth and spiritual revelation. This is OverSoul Overland. It's not just me out there. On some of my adventures, you'll see parts of my beautiful family. From my brother to my fiancée, soon-to-be wife, or maybe just some good friends who've tagged along for an adventure. This is by no means an expert channel, nor a catch-all for all things spiritual wisdom or ASMR. This is a hobby, a hobbyist doing what he enjoys. In a world that's rapidly changing, where there's stressors all around, chose to embrace the beauty of God's creation, to seek the mountains that crawl towards heaven, to watch the trees dance in the wind, to see fog that just becomes a veil all around you, a shroud of comfort and silence, to process the happenings of every sermon and every message and every prayer, and to recant all the moments where I could have been greater. OverSoul Overland is about the journey within, expressed through the journey we take throughout this beautiful land we get to call home. We still see locals. We've traveled to North Carolina and South Carolina and surrounding areas in search of adventure. We've broken most of our adventures down in nice, easy to find folders, so if you're curious about a specific region, we've got you covered. If you wonder any specifics on the truck, let us know in the comments. If you've enjoyed any and everything we've done, or you have some fun feedback, well, as a hobbyist, I'll be humble about it. Leave a comment. In the meantime, let's find more positive than negative. Let's seek the beauty of the moment and things to enjoy as we strive on for the eternal resting place that we all truly do long for. So in this episode, let's see where the road leads and capture our thoughts together. Enjoy this next episode of OverSoul Overland. Today on OverSoul Overland, we pick up where we left off and find ourselves completing the trail after a nice break for lunch. Everyone crawled through the terrain, and you'll notice that there's a new set of vehicles in front of me. As I stated before, this is one of the largest trail rides I've been on over some more technical terrain. So it's going to be nice. You're going to get to see a stock Dodge Ram handle the terrain next. Now, as you know, if a stock vehicle can do it, by golly, this Hummer's gonna do it too. So, let's see where the trail leads, and hang on tight for fun. Because when you see brake lights up ahead, we all know what that means. second leg of our adventure, you're going to notice that we stay on this road for quite a little bit of time. That's because we're looking for a specific turnoff known as Haley Road. Now, Haley Road is full of rocks, varied terrain, a few tight turns, and a pretty good water crossing. Now, at the time, you can see it's very dry conditions. This dust that's blowing through is about how the entire terrain has been. So as you can imagine, some of the water crossings are not going to be as dynamic and dramatic as we might be used to. But there is a lot of technical terrain to navigate on these rockier slopes. So as we continue deeper into Prentice Cooper National State Forest, let's prepare to have a truly memorable experience as we explore this unique part of Middle Tennessee. And sway of the terrain. As you can see, the guy in front of me has shifted into a more appropriate off-road setting as he prepares for this new challenge for his rig. As you can see, the trees just kind of become a tunnel around us, and we're going in. Now, as many of you know, I have a pretty wide vehicle, and some people might get a little nervous in here. There's going to be a few tight spots, but my entire thing is Linexed in a textured paint, so trees aren't going to scratch this thing up. And as you know, this truck has also got a little bit of a height variant, so no rooftop tent for me. So my overlanding setup is usually just a regular tent, or I'm looking into some other options for awnings. But for the time being, we go old school. We just pitch a tent and have a good time, for clearance sake. So as we go deeper in, you're going to notice that the light really loves these trees. Each tree is just illuminated, and it's pretty beautiful when you're going through here real time. The camera can never do a place like this justice. So if you know the way, find yourself a good day and check out Haley Road. It's 4x4 only, so no two-wheel drive, sorry. You've gotta be able to do four-wheel drive or you will get a fine. Now, as you can see, we've got a lot more play in this road as opposed to the previous section of trail. That's because, again, four-wheel drive is required. So you're gonna see a lot more dynamic movement from the vehicles, and it's quite impressive to see what these stock rigs can do out here. They said it was stock friendly. I was like, this will be nice. This will be a good easy ride. And I was surprised because there were a few spots where I was a little bit uncomfortable. But we'll get to those when we get to them. In the meantime, let's see what those taillights are doing up ahead. adventures that I always find myself drawn into and paying attention to are the trees and the health of the underbrush. You can learn a lot about the history of an area and how pure it is by the strength and size of its trees. As many of us know, and we don't often think about, it takes a lot for a tree to form and to grow. And to have a rich ecosystem like this is truly a sight to behold. And it speaks so much to the glory of its creator. And when they're maintained well by folks and people don't abuse the land, you find that the undergrowth is healthy as well, and dead trees are cleared out, and rolling fire hazards are also cleared out. And it's a big issue in places like California, where they have so much land and so much forest, but they don't have the ability to maintain it all. So if this is something that interests you, I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at some of the national and state park websites, because they go into detail about these type of things and what the Park Service is there for and what they do. So, as we continue on down through the trail, you're going to notice that it gets narrow and we're zigzagging down a pretty tight slope. So, let's see what these brake lights are up to up ahead. Promise, we're getting into some of that more technical terrain we were talking about. You're going to see the back end of this Dodge in front of me shift quite a bit on these rocks. And with stock clearance, it's very important which line you pick. Fortunately, we've had some pretty good leads on the trail and on the convoy, so you'll notice that I start to pick different lines here, because I really want to test and see what my rig can do. And that was the whole excitement of this adventure, is knowing that I'd be able to test the suspension, I'd be able to see how my tires hold up on actual rock, I'd be able to have the safety and comfort of knowing that there's people with winches and, travel jacks and some of the more expensive gear that I do not have just yet. So as I'm coming down through here, you're going to notice, number one, it's breathtaking, and number two, these are some pretty tight turns for some larger vehicles, so we have to swing really, really wide. Now, again, this was a dry season, so that would have been a water crossing, and this slope would have been a lot more difficult and full of some more raw material. As you can see, there's still some moisture in the area, so we're not totally void of water, but this is a whole nother animal when the terrain is wet. So we were very fortunate that it was a nice, dry, and easy ride. Definitely a good place to test your abilities. front of me, and we try our best to follow the guy who's in front of us, but as you can see, there's also a little bit of spacing starting to occur. So when you're in a convoy and something like this happens, it is so important that you know your vehicle. Know what your brake distance is, know what you're comfortable with, know what your tire condition is and what you can handle. And the best you can, try to pick the path that's a little easier for yourself, just in case. Because there's nothing more embarrassing than being the guy who got a flat or some other technical difficulty midway through your adventure. So remember, you gotta drive this thing home, and yes, you can do all these things, but probably also make sure your rig's intact for another day. Here we go, we're entering into the darker part of the wood. This is where I really started to enjoy the ride, because the terrain here was the roughest that I've seen and personally been on. Partially because of the grade, partially because of the things that are coming off the road, the tightness of the trail, and the looseness of some of the rock. Now, here is where the size of my vehicle really started to play against me. You can see it. That thing up there is the tree limb that hit the side of my door because I didn't see it originally. So as we come around this corner, you're going to see a pretty big log, and I'm going to just take it into my passenger door. Now, the Line-X held up, and there was no dents, no issues, but definitely one of those things that you always got to watch out for on these bigger rigs. As you can see, this is a very stop and go part of the trail. And again, a huge part of that is the grade of these hills and these slopes, and trying to find a stock-friendly line through all of this terrain. So as you can see, we're starting to see some real big flex on that rear axle, and these are not little rocks, these are substantial rocks now. So, as you can see, we are coming up on the log of doom. The log of doom I'm going to have hit the side of my vehicle in about 3, 2, 1, 1.5. There it is. This is probably the biggest obstacle on the trail. And it's really beautiful because this is actually a riverbed that's running through here that we're about to cross. Now, as you can see, it's the dry season, so no torrents of water, no cascading, rippling effects, just a little bit of a creek in there. us what it looks like to do it in a Toyota, and we're about to see it in a Ram. And of course, you're going to get the first-person shooter view from yours truly. On me how beautiful the land is that we get to live in. It's the inheritance of inheritances, and it is definitely for us to enjoy. But it is also for us to remember why we get to enjoy it. It's by the grace of God. It's by His majesty and the fulfillment of all of His promises that we have a land to dwell in, where we have such freedoms as these. So as I'm crawling up this next slope, best believe that's what's on the forefront of my mind. So, as this terrain goes upward towards heaven, we follow our companions in front and look to the rear view to make sure no one's stuck or lost behind us. This is a pretty serious grade here, so as you can imagine, folks are taking their time. People are activating, for low for some of this, just to make sure they have traction as they're going through. So, fortunately for us, we picked a pretty medium gear, and we've been getting away with it just shifting down our transmission. We haven't really had to activate 4 low, we've just been crawling through it. So, it's pretty noteworthy to know that there are additional traction settings to my Hummer fam out there. You can do way more than what we're doing. I'm doing it pretty moderately, but there's more extreme versions of this stuff that we can do. So, let's keep that in mind as we come up through these breathtaking pines, coniferous trees, and see where this trail is going to lead us this evening. Of the ascension, you're starting to see that glorious sunlight again, and that's when you realize how deep and dark some of these trails can get. So, if you're someone who likes peace and quiet, it's a beautiful place. If you're someone who likes the stillness of the deep wood, it's a beautiful place. And if you're someone looking for a place to admire your own bravery and explore, well, it's still a beautiful place to be. As we start to crawl through some of the tighter parts of the trail, you're just going to see the sunlight dance across every leaf and every ray of light beaming through the trail. It's truly beautiful, and it gives you the perspective for altitude, time of day. You can imagine coming through here right at sunset, how those shadows would be beautiful to behold. In the meantime, let's see what those brake lights are doing up ahead. Now, noteworthy is every now and again you come across an obstacle on the trail that you can't simply drive through. And every once in a while we encounter an obstacle like that, such as little people needing to use the bathroom or a downed tree. I can't remember which of the two occurred here, but we did take a brief pause, and it was just long enough that I decided it may be wise to cut the film here for a little while. But once this was resolved, you're going to see that we enter right back into doing what we love and exploring the wide open road. struck me as particularly interesting about this area is how many trail networks there actually are. Out in East Tennessee, where I'm from, you get a lot of mountainous areas, but almost every gate is closed. And partially because of COVID, but also just again the Park Service having limited resources during especially hard times to maintain the trails and make them safe. So it was really nice to see that we took a route, but along that route there were so many other areas to explore, turn-offs and other trails that go deeper in into varied terrain. I thought about stopping at the ranger's office, but it was closed on my way out. Otherwise, I would have definitely loved to have grabbed a map and come back and explore for myself at a later point in time. As you can see, the Dodge has been flying through this terrain. It's at this moment that I realized that I was stuck in a lower gear. By stuck, I mean I didn't want to stop because the guy behind me was kind of close, and I didn't want him to be like, why is he stopping for nothing? But in hindsight, I really should have just stopped and shifted up so I could keep pace on this more even kilter part of the terrain. If you're surprised to see mud, so was I. It was a nice surprise. Whenever you're off-road, you kind of want proof you actually did something, and it's kind of nice to run through some mud every once in a while. It's like war paint. It just means you actually did something. But unfortunately, it was only that little spot, so as you can imagine, it was quite limited. So here's to hoping we find more ahead. Head splits. Now in hindsight, I realized that if I had veered to the left, I would have been able to approach a more technical part of the trail and been coached down by some more experienced spotters. But unfortunately, I was not aware. So what ended up happening in this case is I followed the guy in front of me to the right. But before we go to dealing with that, it looks like everyone is prepping for this. So we have our spotters in place. They're testing the terrain, which is always wise to make sure that it is indeed safe. Don't just go by memory. Weather happens, things change. These guys played it smart and safe, and they were super courteous of all the people who had not been there and did not know what they were getting into. So as we wait to proceed through the rest of the trail, let's see what happens next. Realizing we were stopped, I figured this would be a good time to assess the mud, assess the damage from the tree limb of doom, and I check out my passenger's door to verify that the armor on this rig held tight and held true, and it most certainly did. So, looks like everyone up front is getting ready to continue, so it is definitely time for me to mount back up, prepare for what's ahead. So, it appears we are rolling again. Perfect timing. Let's see what's in store for us as we approach this next turn. Now, at about this point in our adventure is where I've started to realize that not having radio and comms for these larger group rides can be quite a hassle, and you miss out on certain parts of the adventure that you may otherwise have been willing to participate in. Now, again, this falls to the individual. This isn't my organizer's fault. This isn't anybody else's problem. It's just something that I noted about the trip. So every time we stopped, I had to manually check it out and make sure I knew what was going on, see if it was a prolonged stop, or see if, there was something wrong, or if there were, fun options for adventures up ahead. So, as you can see, we're entering back onto Haley Road now. We're getting ready to go a little bit deeper into the lower part of the water part of the valley. As we crest this hill, one of the more beautiful parts of this whole experience was knowing that I had the love and support of my wife-to-be. Not every person can say they get to explore and, drive an hour away and pursue a hobby with a group of strangers with having the support of their loved ones. Now, it's not lost on me that the beauty of this creation was put in place by my God, and it's just fascinating to rediscover it and to explore the unknown to me, and to find time to just let myself be introverted and just think and appreciate all that has happened. And with the last year and all the things that were going on, it was amazing to have this time to just cruise through the beauty of the earth that I call home, to see a different part of Tennessee and to feel the impact that it can have, to be still and to know that He is God. I was so grateful for the company that I did have, because even though there were many people, there were still many private moments as we were on the trail for quite a while. So it was the perfect combination of fellowship and extroverted conversation and the still stoic nature. I enjoyed it. I'm grateful for it. And as the terrain kind of goes back to being a little bit more mild, soon we're going to lose our friend in a Dodge Ram. He had to peel off, so we'll see him part ways with us shortly. But as we climb these next few obstacles and crest more hills and look to the horizons of the future, you can't help but enjoy the timeless feel of this section of woods, the glow and radiance that the sun provides, and the sondering power of a 4x4 as it moves through this timeless terrain. I'm just grateful to be a part of it all, to learn, to grow, to witness it on that day. It's a humbling thing. Trails like this make the world seem so big and remind us of how small we really are. For that, you can't put a price, can't put a limit. You just simply gotta enjoy for what it is. beauty of the world is basically a bunch of elaborate speculations. The fulfillment of promises from on high, and fleeting moments that escape like sand in an hourglass. And just like that, we're almost to the end of another episode of OverSoul Overland. Join us next week when we finish up part of our ride through the beautiful and unique Prentice State Forest. We've had a lot of fun and we've seen a lot of varied terrain and obstacles. We've learned a lot, we've experienced a lot, and more importantly, we shared a lot with a lot of new folks and got to get closer to God through the whole journey, to see the impact that stillness brings. And in stillness, there isn't necessarily absence of movement, but rather the presence of peace. So hopefully, friends, you found this informative, fun, and a good way to spend some of your time. So, until next time, we'll see what's around the turn, and let's look for more taillights for adventure.